you for joining us today in our webinar series called Immediate Ceasefire and Negotiations and Development of the War in Ukraine since the International Summit for Peace. I am Michelle from IPB. I will be your moderator today together with Sophie Wald. Sophie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Really lovely to see you all. So I'm Sophie Bolt, and I'm one of the vice chairs of the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament in Britain. So it's great to be here, part of this global week of action for peace in Ukraine.
So everyone, thank you for coming today and for our just a little bit reminder for our questions and answer today. I know you have so many questions that you would like to ask. What happened after the conference? What's happening now? How are we, and what will happen next? So for that, we will be a little bit creative in our questions and answer portion today. If you have any questions, please write it in our Freedom Wall in our Jamboard. I'm going to post the link in our chat box. And also, you can also send us an email in IPB at info@ipboffice.berlin. So let me just type it here. And of course, we will really love to hear your thoughts and your questions. So towards at the end of this conference, today we're going to check on it, and if you have any questions or thoughts, we will answer and respond to you directly. So we're going to begin now our webinar, and we'll begin this webinar through our video highlights in the last Vienna conference. So as you remember, in the heart of Europe from June 9 to June 11, 2023 this year, an event paramount significance took place. The International Summit for Peace in Ukraine held in Vienna brought together with world leaders, policymakers, and voices of civil society from various NATO countries, as well as representatives from Russia and Ukraine and Global South. This summit wasn't just about pointing out the problems. It was about finding creative solutions and ways to end the war and to pave the way for ceasefire and negotiation. It underlined that achieving peace isn't solely the task of states and diplomats, but also the responsibility of the global society. So at the summit, the hearts, the mind, and came together to amplify the voices of those calling for a ceasefire and negotiation dialogues. So the International Summit for Peace in Ukraine was a beacon of hope, a call for political leaders to act and support the cause for peace. It was the testament of power and collaboration, understanding, and the collective will for a brighter and peaceful future. So hope you will enjoy these short video highlights of the summit and be a reminder that even in the face of conflict, humanity has the strength to come together and works towards a world where peace prevails. Because it's just not a dream, it's our mission to create a peaceful society. So enjoy the video. Let me just put it on for you.
Peace now! Peace now!
Greetings from Kiev, and what an honor and pleasure to share the stage in the capital of neutrality, Vienna. Here is a place where Ukrainian and Russian peace-loving people could come together and say truth, and truth unites us. It is a relief to participate in this International Summit for Peace in Ukraine and join my voice to many voices of sanity, for ceasefire and peace talks, for peace by peaceful means.
Our vision in Russia, in civil society in Russia and Ukraine, we're part of our common planet. We are neighbors. We are part of our common European habitat and planet Earth. We cannot be enemies.
the global peace builders movement has unbelievable historical mission. You have capacity, you have inspiration, you have energy, you have knowledge, you have competence with many issues which we together collected for 100 years to work with traumatized people, to work with transgenerational trauma, to work with conflict prevention, to work with many, many other very important issues. And now what I want to listen from you, we need your experience now.
The European peace movement is not alone or isolated. The global South, that is the global majority, that is what was called the former Third World, is with this peace movement, even as they have their own internal conflicts and are no paragons of peace.
We, the African Working Group, appeal to all democratic-minded people, organizations, and parties to take an ambiguous, anti-war, and pro-peace positions to avoid further problematic and constructed binaries.
How an intergenerational perspective must be at the root of every youth-led initiative. Participation, action, and reintegration need to be quality ones, fostered by young people and directed towards young people. Yet volunteers from all the world are ready, and you.
Well, that was like such an inspiring video. I hope everybody really enjoyed that. I certainly did. So much energy and hope and determination from our peace movement at such a critical time. So thanks so much. I know there's lots of work went into getting that together. So well done. We're now going to have like a brief summary of the summit itself. And then the sort of the follow-up, what's been going on since then. He's literally just coming into the meeting. Let me just admit, Gerhard Koffler, and see if he's all right. Hi there, Gerhard. We've just come onto the item around giving the summary of the international summit and the follow-up. Are you happy to just to introduce that now? You've got about 5 minutes. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Okay. Hello to everybody. Sorry, I've completely forgotten about this meeting. What should I tell you about what was after the conference? What happened, or what is the most interesting for you?
Well, I think it's either that or like, does Sean want to come in first just to sort of give a bit of an update, and then maybe you can kind of like come in on the sort of the follow-up on what's been going on since the summit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would that help? Sean,
Okay.
Are you okay to do that?
Yeah. Generally, I would say that the respect against our work has, how to say, is growing. Yeah. Because we just fought this through, that we have been thrown out from the ÖGB, and I have now finally a date with the ÖGB to discuss what happened and why they did it, and I hope also that we have an issue concerning the missing money and the lost money we had and so on. But a real push, generally, I can't see, but what I can see is that the feedback we get from a lot of people that it was so good that we did it, and it was so important that we fought this through and made the conference. Yeah, this is the opponents and the ones who, if I say it like this, who fought against us in the newspaper, they're just silent. Nobody is opposing us, but like it was before, the peace movement is not really a seen force in the media and from the journalists, but on the direct contact I have with people whom I meet on different occasions, and the talks we had, we spoke to the former president of Austria, and we talked to some journalists, and we had a open conference on the street, and there were 3 parliamentarians who were coming, and there I see that we get some more respect, yeah, and not so much to be pushed away like we have been the feeling before this conference. So the peace movement in Austria, the organizations are all very small and they have nearly no means. And with this conference, I have the impression that, yeah, there's more awareness that we are here and what we want to achieve concerning the Ukraine. Yeah.
Thanks.
Is this helpful, this information for you?
Yes, very helpful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Sean, I don't know if you was there anything that you wanted to add, or Rainer?
I would only underline one sentence from Gerhard, that the most important part of the Congress was that the Congress happened, because it opened the door for a new development of international contacts, of new relations between people in the different countries, and put the question of ceasefire and negotiations on the agenda of the international scene. I think this is a big success of the Vienna conference, and I can only underline the thanks to Gerhard and the Austrian colleagues, which were doing a tremendously important job to fight it through. And now we can see that this fighting through open new doors for new possibility of common activities and actions.
Okay, thanks. Was there anything you wanted to add, Sean, or?
I won't add too much more, but the event really, maybe one more thing to underline would be just that it was a diverse event as well. Not everyone who was in the room was of the same opinion or thought. There were a lot of very interesting and in-depth exchanges between people with different perspectives, different points of view, that helped us to, even when we have differences within the peace movement, be able to find points of unison, points where we come together and combine solutions and further actions we can take. And I think Degi will also, Hans-Peter Degischer, who's with us, will speak also next very briefly about some of the other actions we've taken in terms of following up with embassies and this sort of work as well. And then maybe just as a final point, for those who have not yet seen the videos from the summit, I will post the link to our YouTube playlist of those videos in the chat, so you can also look more into that moving forward. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Sean. I'm going to hand back over to Michel now.
Or sorry, Peter, do you want to add something? Degi?
Okay, I just can report that I asked several offices to bring the declaration to them and to explain it to them. First of all, with the Ukrainian embassy in Vienna, and the Russian embassy both reacted very fast and gave me a date within a week. The contact with the Ukrainian embassy wasn't very helpful because they just declared they will fight any peace movement or demonstration as they did. And he admitted that his intervention was the cause for the throwing out by the Austrian trade union and by the cancelling of the press conference, and he will do it to any further peace demonstration which doesn't start with the Zelensky plan, which demands the withdrawing of the Russian troops. And he explained, as I thought, well, this is very unrealistic, so we have to win. So it's really a very hard line, the Ukrainian fight, and they oppose any peace movement which doesn't demand the defeat of the Russian. So it's a very strange position, and strange enough, the Austrian Foreign Ministry supports this, which I don't understand at all, and we will try to get some press movement to clarify this. The Russian, on the contrary, were very friendly. And we are for peace initiatives, but the Ukrainians don't want it. So asking them why can't they just call for a ceasefire, as they said, well, we did it once at Easter time and it was rejected by the Ukrainian. So they they seemed very open, but they of course they said they cannot react only on one side. So that was a funny situation on these both meetings, and well, we try again. The Organization of Security in Europe didn't answer on our demand. The European Union representation in Vienna sent us some notices about European policy, and I didn't find any hint of peace initiatives, and I answered them that there's nothing which indicates any tendency to organize any peace initiatives. Well, we didn't meet them yet, and I find it very strange on those positions, which look very much like the NATO position.
Maybe I can add something from my experience. It's okay?
Yes, just make it just very quick.
Yeah. I feel also that within our Abfang organization, several of the members who participated in preparing and in doing the conference, within this organization, I feel more solidarity. So we came a little more together because of all what happened around the conference and also the conference itself. Yeah. So this is a positive side effect, which is very good and very good to feel here. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerhard and Peter, for the contributions, and also from our IPB colleague on the brief update, brief summary and update after the conference. And to give us the perspective about the Ukrainian war in geostrategic competition, I'll call Ms. Anuhadra Chenoy, who's a member of the Academy and very esteemed professor from university in New Delhi in India and a member of our Common Security Working Group, and TNI Associate Ms. Anu Hadras Chennai. Anu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, IPB and other friends in the peace movement. I've been asked to just briefly speak on the updates in this war since early June and what these mean for chances of peace. So to do that, I'm really looking at the agendas that all parties to this conflict have had and how much they have achieved, because maybe that can direct us to what will happen and the peace that could follow. So first, Ukraine. We know its goals were and its ambition was to join the EU and NATO. And of course, they have not achieved that, and it probably only happened post-conflict. But since then, since the counter-offensive, sadly, they have only gained a few square meters of territory and lost almost 70,000 men, tens of thousands amputees. The front line has more landmines, and it's a fair for the world's arms, clustered ammunition lying around. It's a graveyard of military equipment from 30 NATO countries and 20 other countries. The men over there are trying to flee both the forced recruitment drives as well as thousands are surrendering. The civil government is holding because of foreign aid. Ordinary people have conflict fatigue and trauma, but right-wing nationalism, which is at the core, I believe, of this government, is holding everyone hostage as they want to continue. Their terms of settlement, as you've said yourself in this earlier, is about Ukrainian territory as of 2014. For Russia, the objective for this was to stop Ukraine from entering NATO, denazification, meaning, I think, to safeguard Russian ethnic groups in the Donbass from the civil war and genocide. These are now part of the Russian Federation, so they've achieved that. They wanted a regime change to some extent, but that has not been achieved. Militarily, they wanted to secure Crimea and the Black Sea Fleet. And so they've managed to establish fortified defense lines and grind down the Ukrainian army. And if the war continues, they could take Sevastopol. But in this offensive, they've gained only 200 square miles. But I don't think territorial gain is part of their strategy. They have actually recruited 185,000 contract reserves for the military service. The sanctions have not damaged the economy. The trade with China, India, Middle East have blunted the impact of sanctions. Their GDP is expected to grow. So basically, politically, economically, and industrially, the Russians are prepared for a long war. So they are waiting. They can go for a counteroffensive. They can go for peace. So that's for Russia. The US objectives were clearly to weaken Russia. And currently, a lot of their military chiefs, which I've been listening to, say that the Russian army and the state will collapse on its own. But I see no evidence of this. So the proxy war continues because they have not achieved their agenda of weakening Russia. Their second agenda was to keep Europe firmly tied behind US national interests, which they have achieved to a certain extent. Their third interest, as Blinken recently repeated and clarified, that their security paradigm was in this order is to make sure to show that Russia and China are working together to make a world safe for autocracy, and the US and NATO has to stop it. And he calls G7 the steering committee for the world's most advanced democracies. However, the rest of the world, I don't think they want the steering committee. Their also goal was to isolate Russia. I believe that's not really been achieved, because if you can see the three major global meetings recently, the G20, the BRICS, and the G77, all three meetings took every step not to mention Russia in their outcome documents and only broadly supported negotiations, and an end to all conflicts worldwide. The fourth agenda of the US is to legitimize and increase their defense spending, which they've achieved. And about 55% of the US dollars of $1.5 billion for Ukraine defense is allocated to the military industrial complex in the US. So really, for me, I think the West is caught in its own narrative trap, which has little to do with reality, but for them, the war goes on. The Global South has not changed their position. They remain largely neutral. They do not want to be active in any US-NATO war. They remain neutral now by opposing sanctions. They root for a multipolar world where they can leverage all sides for their benefits. And they continue to propose for a peaceful end and negotiated end to this war, which they're willing to offer, but their voice is not hegemonic and very often not listened to. The impact, of course, is that there is a militarization worldwide. The Russians have announced an increase in its defense spending by 70% for 2024. The EU is going for that 2%, of their budget for defense as asked by NATO. Most countries of Asia are increasing their defense budget because they see the beginnings of a theater of conflict in the Asia Pacific. So this militarist culture is trickling down into society, into communities, into other conflicts, and into interpersonal relations, especially in Global South, where the new trend is to co-opt women into NATO and other military organizations. So lastly, therefore, what are the prospects for peace? From what I can gather from all these states is the victory is likely to be on the battlefield. Both sides, Russians on one side and Ukraine and NATO on the other, believe that the collapse of the other side is likely, but to me it seems that the collapse of the Ukrainians is more likely than that of the Russian army. Or if common sense prevails on all sides, which also doesn't seem likely. So therefore, ultimately, the peace movement really has to continue to crack the dominant war narratives. And I believe this is happening. And really, the global majority outside of NATO wants this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Really, really important analysis there. A lot for us to absorb. We're now going to be moving on to looking at the repression against conscientious objectors. I'm sure lots of people have been following the appalling, targeting of Yuri Shelyenko. I think Alexei, is it Tsuni, is here from the European Bureau for Conscientious Objection, and he's going to talk about his situation. I think we've also got a video. So over to you, Alexia.
Hello, can you hear me, first of all? Okay, thank you. Thanks, first of all, for the invitation to join this interesting webinar. I'm so jealous that I missed the Vienna summit. I see the video you made. It's amazing. Well done. It's very good and very encouraging that you are an oasis, of peace in a world full of wars and violence and conflict. So we really appreciate your support and specifically for the right to conscientious objection to military service, which is, of course, most relevant now during the war. And actually, it's there where indeed you see the value and where we need really to support activists like Yuri, like Olga, like our Russian friends. So I just want to be sure that we will first watch the video that Yuri kindly sent us, and I will then say a couple of words as well. So let me share, can I share my screen? Share screen and audio so that you can watch the video. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I hope you also...
Dear friends, greetings from Kiev, from Ukrainian pacifist movement. I wish I could discuss today new initiatives regarding ceasefire and peace talks, but there are more pressing human rights issues, of course. You know my circumstances. Thanks to Ukrainian intelligence, I am a suspect in a case of alleged justification of Russian aggression in the statement Peace Agenda for Ukraine and the World, which condemns Russian aggression. It is absurd, politically motivated persecution and interference into our human rights activism. Unfortunately, the militarists are successful in their fight against human rights. Ukraine loses democracy and rule of law. Constitutional Court found very dubious pretexts to avoid consideration of constitutionality of persecution for advocacy of peace and for conscientious objection to military service after constitutional complaints of mine and Vitaly Alexeyenko, prisoner of conscience, released by Supreme Court. Probably it made militarists worry a bit, so they take measures. Unfortunately, constitutional justice in Ukraine is not effective legal remedy today. Supreme Court, under pressure of army and security service, refused to satisfy a lawsuit of Andrei Vishnevetsky to President Zelensky regarding the establishment of procedure of discharge from military service on the grounds of conscience. You know my circumstances. I was searched and subjected to night house arrest, my computer and smartphone taken. It was so encouraging that the International Peace Bureau immediately published a call for justice, that many friends supported me, War Resisters International, European Bureau for Conscientious Objection, International Fellowship of Reconciliation, launched petitions campaign, World Beyond War gathered 10,000 signatures for petition demanding to stop persecution. In Italy, Movimento Nonviolente, Mir Italy, and Un Ponte Per, and other friends. In Austria, peace researchers and educators Friedrich Glasl and Werner Wintersteiner. In Germany, Hannes Jung and David Chewing. In France, peace movement and newspaper L'Humanité. Nuclear scientists and Quakers sent letters of support and many others. Sorry, I have limited time and can't respond to all letters and requests for interviews, but I wish to say thank you from the deep of my heart to all people who support peace movement in Ukraine, who support me and protest, picket Ukrainian embassies, like Veterans for Peace and Center for Conscience and War in the United States and Deutsche Friedensgesellschaft in Germany. I am grateful to all the IPB family for support in hard times for peace movements in Russia, where activists are smeared as foreign agents, in Belarus, where propaganda published death threats to Olga Karach, in some European countries like Lithuania, where conscientious objectors from Russia and Belarus face hostile reception, and in Ukraine, where advocacy of peace and conscientious objection to military service is persecuted, similarly like under Putin's and Lukashenko dictatorship, despite ambitious claims of President Zelensky to wage war for democracy and freedom. Nobel Peace Prize nomination protects all of us a bit, a little, but repressions continue despite they know that world is watching, and instead of stopping to repress peace movement, the militarists smear peace movement. Recently, I filed defamation lawsuits against the notorious governmental agencies, Center for Countering Disinformation and Security Service of Ukraine. Also, I continue to defend in my criminal case. It is indeed a threat that for this so-called justification of Russian aggression, when I always, in all my public statements, condemn Russian aggression, also reminding that UN Charter demands to seek peaceful ways to deal with any misdoings in international relations. Anyway, it could be 5 years of prison. It could be confiscation of property. They could spread lies about peace activists. They could jail us. But the idea of peace will always inspire people. Let's double our efforts to build a world where everybody refuses to kill and no wars ever possible. Peace and happiness to you.
So thanks also to Yuri for sending this video to our webinar today. And indeed, I would like to confirm, because I have been already 3 times in mission in Ukraine during the war, after the outbreak of the war. And indeed, it's true, like Yuri says, all the activists are targeted, all the independent voices are targeted. You know that even there is only one television channel now. I was shocked that all the others are now not existing. There's a government control, you know, there is the military propaganda, the propaganda of war everywhere. Lawyers are also targeted, and even them, they are afraid, which is also something very much worrying. So still, we have very few activists, like the Ukrainian pacifist movement, but from them also some members are also now afraid because they see the prosecution against Yuri. So indeed, we need to encourage them. Everything is so much helpful, like the IPB nomination for the Peace Nobel Prize. This is really very good. It's like a shield to protect them and to support them. And indeed, we don't leave them alone. We need to be present, if it's possible, also in their courts. You know, there are these trials, the court hearings, which are in Kiev or in other cities in Ukraine, that it's important to have an international observer, also for the public opinion there, to influence, also for the media, and also for themselves, to encourage them and to show them that in practice we do support them. We had celebrated the International Day of Peace recently, and we issued also a joint press release, EBCO, with War Resisters International, IFOR, and Connection EV. We are together in the Object War campaign, which has been launched and has been very successful so far. And it's not only for Ukraine. We demand protection and asylum for all the deserted and conscientious objectors to military service, even for the anti-war activists. You know, even artists are jailed in Russia or everywhere. So it's Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus. In Belarus, there is also the death penalty. We have the Protection for Olga campaign currently running. We all know Olga Karach from the Belarusian organization Our House. It was so shocking that her application for political asylum was rejected by Lithuania, which is always by definition a peace builder, it's a peacemaking person, it's a human rights defender. Her asylum was rejected in August, and now we are continuing to support her, and with the appeal and with all the campaign for her. Yuri is under this house arrest, partial, fortunately, since August. Also, like Olga, is since August, her application was rejected. So, and we have again all the Russian conscientious objectors and deserters, and those even who were surrendered or who were captured, that the European Commission had committed to support them. But you know, still it speaks about asylum, but still the people cannot go out of Russia to ask asylum. So there is an appeal for them. There is an appeal made by the Russian anti-militarist movement to help for visas, for visa type C, visa type B, in order that they can indeed escape. And there are even young people, students, who cannot even continue their studies in European universities. So all of these situations have really made us more active. We are trying our best, and we are so grateful for the international solidarity for this human right of conscientious objection. And I just wanted to close my intervention that calling you to also support our actions for the 4 and 10 December, from the 4 until 10 of December. It's this week in view of the Human Rights Day on December 10th that we call for actions for supporting the Russians, Belarusian, and the Ukrainian conscientious objectors and deserters immediately. And we just say simply to the European Union that be really human, be like democratic, like you say, open the borders and give everyone who is against this war really the option to enter the European Union to be really protected. So for all countries involved, Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine, we want to have their open access to EU. We want to have the right to asylum, the right for visas, the right to study, the right to work, the right to be free and safe. So we call for demonstrations and rallies and protest actions in front of Russian, Belarusian, and Ukrainian embassies and EU representations, whatever any group can make, any organization, from a protest or to a meeting or vigils, other creative actions like artistic, it's free and it's open. So from December 4 until 10, the Human Rights Day, we focus for the human right to conscientious objection to military service. And I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to participate in your interesting webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alexia, for since you already also begun the introduction of the different activities that going to the global week piece of action for Ukraine. So we're going now to proceed in our next section, which is about introducing the different actions of the world towards for this mobilization week. And like to also mention the one in the chat that we appreciate all the things that you've done for the conscientious objectors, and we are in solidarity of this advocacy. So to begin, the different actions for Week of Global Mobilization for Peace in Ukraine that will happen from 30th of September, which is today, we're launching, and up to the October 8th this year, which is our common goal is to call for immediate ceasefire and peace negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. So we'll begin introducing different actions with CND. We're very close in our heart. Sophie?
Lovely. Thanks very much. I'll whiz through. So C&D's taking part in actions against the British Conservative government, which has obviously is amongst like the most hawkish of the US NATO allies in terms of its support for the Ukraine war, in terms of like the amount of like military hardware it's been sending, you know, most recently sort of like the long range missiles, but it's also the government is also facing like really huge pressures around like the economic situation within the country. You know, Britain is like the worst performing economy of all the G20 countries. We've got the highest inflation for over 40 years, and we've got the longest pay squeeze for over 200 years. And yet, of course, you know, Britain is, militarily speaking, is basically sort of like the highest in terms of military spending at all the Western European countries, and also the 4th highest in the world as a percentage of GDP. So our focus is around making the sort of like raising awareness around these kind of wrong priorities of our government. So this weekend we're going to be protesting at the Conservative Party conference, a big demonstration which is like Wages Not War, which is to bring together all those people who want decent pay, investment in public services, and investment in climate action, which is you know, the majority of the population. And we're also co-hosting a public meeting there, which is part of the People's Assembly against austerity actions, which are taking place over the weekend. And then the following week, we're organising a Wages Not Weapons fringe meeting at the Labour Party conference. So obviously the Labour Party is like the main opposition party, which is polling now to win the next year's general election. It's also taken a very sharp right-wing shift to being like overtly kind of pro-NATO and pro-nuclear weapons. So, you know, got a big job there. However, the threat of nuclear war over Ukraine is really sort of focusing minds. You know, lots of people are very like frightened about this. Like films like Oppenheimer are really kind of galvanizing sort of public opinion around it. And certainly in Britain, the issue of NATO nuclear expansion at the US base Lakenheath, the air base there, has now actually broken into the mainstream media, national mainstream media at long last. A recent poll shows that 59% of the population oppose US nukes being sited in Britain, which is very significant. And last week we had we organised a citizens' weapons inspection at Lakenheath, which got really strong regional news coverage. I'll put the link in the chat to that. So we're really building on this you know, opposition to basically sort of like people recognizing that hosting US nuclear weapons is only going to, you know, make us put us more at risk. So that's what we're up to.
Thank you, Sophie, for the CND actions for this week. We'll also will become very quick on the introducing of different actions. We'll call next from sorry, Carl, the peace actions for Germany. Yeah, it's quite breaking. Could you check it again?
Michelle, wait for a moment. He's coming to me. Then it's easier for him.
Ah, you're together. Okay.
Yeah, we are in the same building.
Okay. Okay. All right. Here we go.
Here I am again. Okay, I want to make a short statement to the actual activities of the German peace movement. Next Tuesday, October the 3rd, is a national holiday in Germany, also called German Unity Day, to celebrate the reunification of the two German states in 1990. Every year, official celebrations are therefore held in a major German city on a rolling basis. This year, Hamburg is scheduled for the occasion. The German peace movement is taking this as an opportunity to hold regional demonstrations and rallies in Hamburg and other cities. Actions are also planned in Berlin, Munich, and Düsseldorf. The upcoming actions must be enlightened to formulate the demands for a ceasefire and peace negotiations in Ukraine. These principles apply regardless of how one evaluates the Russian military intervention in Ukraine in detail. The political consequences of the war in Ukraine are increasingly visible in Germany. These are now multiple and can be mentioned in a few keywords. First, social cuts. The money for necessary social safeguards, such as against the alarming child poverty, which was a recent controversy in Germany, is allocated in the 2024 federal budget with only a fraction of the actual requirements, while at the same time military spending is massively increased. Cuts in social spending are justified by a break on the national budget that is even officially fixed in the constitution. After the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 22, however, a package of 100 billion euros was magically generated as a war loan, officially as special assets for the German forces. Second keyword, militarization. Enemy images are reinforced, arms deliveries to Ukraine are increased for a military victory peace instead of the necessary negotiated peace. The Green Party, which emerged more than 40 years ago from parts of the peace movement, has played a leading role in this. Third, great power ambitions. Germany is in decline, accelerated by the economic war against Russia, but continues to seek political and military dominance. The economic war was announced after the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 22 by the German Foreign Minister Baerbock from the Green Party, with the words that economical sanctions would now ruin Russia. Now, Germany is in the process of being economically ruined with the policy by even taking a hard confrontation course against China, which is a much more economically important trading partner. Fourth, migration. Germany is actively involved in the brutal defense against refugees from Africa and the Middle East at the European Union's external borders, while at the same time selectively recruiting useful, skilled workers from abroad. The real problem with housing, care, and integration of refugees, however, is a now dominant number of refugees from Ukraine.
Sorry, Carl, thank you for about the actions that you're doing in Germany, but I'm sorry we have to cut out of this because we have to give more time also for other countries that would like to present their actions.
Should be enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
If you have a website for it or more information, just put it in our chat box and we'll be happy to share it across the participants in our website too. So
okay, never mind. Only one final remark. I'm in a hurry because tomorrow we make a big peace congress in Frankfurt with prominent members from unions and the Social Democratic Party, and I'm involved in organizational tasks, and it will be very successful, I think. Despite other, and next Tuesday we have some demonstrations. Okay, that's all.
Good luck with the demonstrations tomorrow on October 3. We hope all the best for it. Yes, for our next speaker, we're going to check in. Thank you, Carl. For the next speakers, would like to limit the time for 1 to 2 minutes, just to also give time for other countries, other organizations to share the actions for peace. Just like to quick check it. Do we have the participant here from Youth for Human Rights campaign in Nepal? All right, I think they're not able to log in. All right, so seeing none, we'll call next from World Beyond War, Canada, Tamara.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tamara
Wilkes.
Lawrence. I'm Tamara Lawrence. I'm with the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace and the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom Canada. I was in Vienna for the International Summit for Peace in Ukraine. I thought it was really excellent and empowering and hopeful. When I got back to Canada, I did a number of presentations across the country informing Canadians about the outcomes of the conference and encouraging them to do something for this week of action. And what we have planned in Canada, our two organizations are part of a broader network called the Canada-wide Peace and Justice Network, which is comprised of about 45 peace groups across the country. And we have called a week of action from October 1st to October 8th. And that is because today is the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation with Indigenous people. So we wanted to honor that and have our week of action to start on October 1st. We have a statement. We have about 12 actions across the country. Rallies are taking place from coast to coast, from Victoria and Vancouver, Regina, Winnipeg, Ottawa, Toronto, Montreal, and many other cities. We also did a webinar in the lead up to our week of action on September 20th. It was a webinar on cluster munitions and depleted uranium being sent to Ukraine. It's an excellent webinar. I'll share a recording in the chat. And we are going to end our week of action with another webinar, and that will be with Jacques Bode on his new book called Ukraine Between War and Peace. I encourage you to tune into this webinar. It will be Sunday, October 8th at 4 p.m. Jacques Bode is a former Swiss senior military officer who also wrote a fantastic book that I encourage everybody to get. It's called Operation Z, The Hidden Truths of the War in Ukraine Revealed. He challenges the mainstream media and the Western governments views on this war, and it's so important for us to work together to stop this war. In Canada, the theme of our week of action is Peace Now, Stop the War, Stop NATO, because we think that NATO is principally responsible for the war that's raging in Ukraine, and we desperately want not only to end the war, but also to end NATO. So we're so pleased to be in solidarity with all of you around the world. From Canada, we're working very hard because, as you know from the mainstream media, from the headlines this past week, things are very difficult in our country. We don't have any parliamentarians who are standing for peace. Zelensky was just in our country, and the federal government, the Trudeau administration, announced another $650 million to prolong the war. And of course, cheered a Nazi veteran in the gallery. So we have a lot of work to do in Canada. We can't do it without you. We need to stick together, stand in solidarity, because we will end the war together. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Tamara. And we'll go next to Peace Coalition, Peace in Ukraine Coalition. Jen?
Yes, hello. My name is John. I'm sitting in for Marcy and Bert, who live in California, who can't be on the call because they're asleep. But this will be the biggest days of action in the United States on this war to date. I'm happy to say the Peace in Ukraine Coalition is a group of peace activists with Code Pink being kind of the tent pole or the lead. And it includes the Answer Coalition, Massachusetts Peace Action, World Beyond War, Veterans for Peace, DSA International Committee, of which I'm a part, Roots Action, Pax Christi, etc. Today, there's going to be 13 actions across the country, in Boston, Madison, Wisconsin, Oregon, 4 actions in California alone, Arkansas. One of the actions will be a banner drop at Lockheed Martin, the campus in Pennsylvania. Tomorrow, there'll be four more actions, including a march in between CNN and the New York Times in New York City to highlight the media's cheerleading for the war in Ukraine. On Tuesday, this will be maybe the biggest day. Where there's going to be a talk and a rally in Washington, D.C. with Dr. Cornel West, who's a very eloquent speaker and presidential candidate in the Green Party. He'll be joined with Medea from Code Pink and Eugene of the Breakthrough News, popular YouTube channel. That will be in person and live streamed. It'll be about midnight in London and 1 o'clock in the morning in Berlin. So, but you can catch it on YouTube later. October 4th, there will be the coalition will meet in Congress, and there'll be sit-ins in different progressive senator and congressmen or people, I guess, offices. Currently, as you guys probably know, The most recent CNN poll had a majority of Americans against arming Ukraine at 55%, and there's a lot of opposition amongst the working classes in the states, and there is a political opposition for the first time with the Republican Party, but zero on the Democratic side. So this action on the 4th will target Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, different Democratic progressive politicians, and hoping to get them on board as well, with maybe a dozen or 16, I believe, Republican Congress who pledged not to continue support for the war in Ukraine. So this is it's a very exciting, because there is some movement in the United States for the first time on this. It has gotten more publicity. One of the coalition's aims is to, like the other speakers have mentioned, is to highlight the costs of war and how it takes away from social spending, but also to target the media. And BlackRock is getting targeted, a financial institution as well. But I'll leave it at that. I look forward to hearing the reports back from the coalition.
Thank you, John, for sharing all the activities in the United States. And now we're going to France. Alain, would you like to share
thank
your
you.
activities?
I speak for the French Mouvement de la Paix. Our peace actions in France, it was in September, around the September 21 International Day of Peace and September 26 International Day for the total elimination of nuclear weapons. We oppose the politics of the French government and of growing military expenditures and modernization of nuclear weapons. All these initiatives in September, it was more than 100 in all parts of France, have contributed to the preparation of the October 7. It will be the day for peace in Ukraine as part of the International Week of Action starting today. On Saturday, October 7, we will be organizing rallies, demonstrations, and public initiatives in the widest possible scale. We will have the delegations to local authorities and to local representatives of the government. And we want also to organize debates in university towns aimed at students. We think there is a little movement in the public opinion in France. It seems to us that the idea is growing that there is no military solution to the conflict. We have to not to win the war, as Macron said, but we have to win the peace. And more French people think that France should play another role, a much more active role, taking political and diplomatic initiatives. This is what we will be demanding on the president and the government on October 7th. We hope that the idea of a ceasefire and negotiation will grow in Europe. We had the visit of Pope Francis in Marseille, and he helped to raise awareness of this need. It was not the only issue, peace in Ukraine, but also the migrations and the crisis for the migrants. But it was a very good contribution to our mobilizations, and we hope that with all European, we can contribute to peace in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Alain. I think all the activities and some books also are posted in our chat box. Please free to see it from our participants. And next, we will have something from Latin America. Miss Guadalupe Ponce, would you like to share your activities? Thank you.
Good afternoon, dear friends and companions in the fight for peace who are on the other side of the sea and around the world. On behalf of my organization, I thank you for your kind invitation to present at this event And I also appreciate your listening in this space of confluence in the fight for peace and to say no to war and no to social injustice. My name is Davina Guadalupe Ponce Martinez. I am currently the president of the Mexican Renewal Group of the World Social Forum, a movement that works for global social justice through the democracy within countries like Mexico, and also for urgent democracy among countries of the world. Our solidarity with the victims of the Russia-Ukraine war and of all the wars in the world. We were born as Grupo Renovador México of the Foro Social Mundial to the need precisely for the organizations of the Foro Social Mundial, which was verified in the first week of May 2022 in Mexico, because we saw that there was a hoarding of functions and inefficient vertical organization, contrary to the principles and values of the Foro Social Mundial, which aggravated by the pandemic, resulting in a delay of almost 3 years, and in any case, a greatly reduced event compared to those that preceded it in other countries. This Grupo Renovador México continues to fight against the capitalist system and its globalization, and everything it feeds on, the inequality and unfair global world trade monopolized by fewer and fewer people, and the injustice that this causes in all aspects of people's lives, the communities whose assets are taken without considerations from the outside and with internal betrayals of criminal politicians. We are joining the mobilizations that you, sister organizations for peace, are organizing. For us, it is very stimulating to join. We have built a work program in the public mobilizations that we will do on Saturday, October 7th at the Independence Column near the USA Embassy here, the emblematic center of our capital city, at 5 p.m. in central Mexico. And then we will meet in a deliberative assembly for peace and against war in the Telephone Operators Union at 16 Rio Neva Street, 9th floor, with a rich program where we have featured guests on topics of the effect of the aberrant global capitalist economic system, such as peace through a negotiation solution, not to war, yes to disarmament, and yes to global demilitarization, and not to migration, the dispossessions and displacement of people and communities, not to the murder of social activists and journalists, yes to the protection of nature, and above all, to the organization of the people in constituent assemblies of new political constitutions that structure political, economical, and social systems compatible with life, peace, food security, and health services, decent housing, and respect for women, and in general, respect for life. I thank you for the space of participation. I thank you, Leo Gabriel, who has been an element of cohesion for our movement. And link with you, I thank Emily Molinari, and I give you a fraternal greetings from the members of the Grupo Renovador México that supports the World Social Forum and all related and sister organizations in noble purpose for the benefit of humanity. And we hope that the mobilization is successful Thank you so much.
Thank you, Guadalupe, for presenting us the actions from Latin America. I know Tord is raising his hand. I'm afraid that we don't have much time today, but you'll see in the chat box the activity that they will have, the webinar on social and ecological paths to peace. There's also, if you open the Microsoft Word, they have the Zoom link for that, so kindly mark that in your calendar as well. And one last from Asia, just like to share the action that will take place. They will have on October 7. They will have an online webinar for Keep Space for Peace, Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space. This is a second installment about the increasing militarization action by the US in the Philippines. And also simultaneously, they will have Art for Peace in person. That will happen in Metro Manila, and it's already posted in the website as well. All the actions for peace during this week will be can be seen in our website here in the chat box. Yeah, so for our next speakers, apologies to all the participants for today. I know we're quite we don't have much time to say all the actions for peace globally, so please share it to the chat box so we can post it in the website and we'll share it later on. So for our next speaker for today, we'll have Joseph Gerson. Sophie, do you want to introduce our next speaker?
Hi, Joseph, are you ready? So the amazing Joseph Gershon from the Campaign for Peace, Disarmament and Common Security, who's going to be back from the brink. Over to you, Joseph.
Okay, thank you, Sophia and Michelle. And I'm glad to join this session to be learning from all of you. I'm going to begin by focusing on the continuing dangers that the desperation of the Ukrainian war could trigger miscalculations in the possible use of nuclear weapons. Even as there were hopeful words from Sergei Lavrov yesterday, the current situation remains dangerous for all of us. If we are not moving into a new Cold War, we seem to be moving into tectonic geopolitical changes and an international great power ice age. And the fluid situation makes it quite dangerous. Earlier this week, Dr. Alexei Gromyko, a significant figure in the Russian establishment, reiterated what serious analysts have been saying since February 2022. Almost 2 years into the war, we are still confronted by the most dangerous moment in world history since 1962. That was when the US and the Soviet Union went eyeball to eyeball during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Back then, the Kennedy administration believed that the chances of an apocalyptic US-Soviet nuclear war were between 1/3 and 1/2. That's how dangerous the Ukraine war remains, especially if it drags on. The Cuban Missile Crisis was also the occasion for a series of miscalculations. We were brought to the brink of nuclear annihilation when a mistaken launch order was sent to a US missile base in Okinawa, and again when a nuclear-armed Soviet submarine was attacked with depth charges in violation of Kennedy's orders. We were saved by a courageous Russian submarine officer who chose to risk losing rather than using his nuclear-tipped torpedoes, and by a US missileer in Okinawa who chose to ignore the mistaken launch order. Those decisions, luck, and inspired diplomacy, which we lack today, explain why we're all alive. There is no reason to believe that command and control systems are any better now than they were then. Dr. Gromyko's other point, which we needn't love but must respect, helps to explain the urgency of today's crisis. Victory in the Ukraine war is, he said, a key national security interest of Russia. And, quote, no nuclear power can accept losing a military conflict. Fortunately, at this stage in the war, unlike February 24th, 2022, victory may consist of an armistice that leaves Moscow in control of Crimea and the devastated districts which it occupies, rather than the total defeat and functional elimination of the Ukrainian state. The greatest danger we would face would be if Kiev threatened Moscow's hold of Crimea, home to Moscow's Black Sea Fleet for almost 3 centuries. Fortunately, that possibility with the stalemate seems to be diminishing. As one Russian general said in our Track 2 exchange, if Crimea is threatened, quote, all bets are off in terms of Russian resort to its nuclear arsenal. The annexation of Crimea in 2014 violated the UN Charter, but it was consistent with Russian history, with the current Russian Empire's perceived interests, and reflected popular support of the Russian-identified majority in Crimea. 60 years ago, President Kennedy was prophetic when he advised that, quote, while defending our own vital interests, nuclear powers must avert those confrontations which bring an adversary to a choice of either humiliating retreat or nuclear war. To do so, he said, would evidence only the bankruptcy of our policy and of a collective death wish. Regardless of the rights and wrongs, NATO's reckless expansion to Russia's borders, the EU insistence that Kiev sever economic ties with Moscow in order to join the European Union, and Putin's brutal preemptive and imperial invasion of Ukraine, the reality is that time is not on Ukraine's side, as others have said. Like it or not, the war can only end with a dirty deal. Better now than later. With the Ukraine war, with Russia's turn to the east, including North Korea, and with U.S.-Chinese competition for regional hegemony in Asia Pacific, we are also faced with the dangerous absence of what once passed for strategic stability, and we also have the complete absence of arms control agreements and disarmament diplomacy among the nuclear powers. I've had the privilege of being invited, and also the challenge of being invited into a confidential Track 2 semi-diplomatic process that includes current and former senior government advisors, arms control and other diplomats, and even a few generals from Russia, the US, and Europe. In my remaining time, I'll share some of what I've learned there. There's nothing left of the arms control architecture. Practicing linkage, Moscow has pulled the plug on the New START and Open Skies treaties, as well as most of the communications and transparency provisions that serve crisis management throughout much of the Cold War and post-Cold War era. Until Moscow is satisfied with the Ukraine war-related diplomacy, the Kremlin has no intention of resuming arms control or strategic stability negotiations. But blame does not lie entirely with Moscow. Russia's nuclear threats mirror them more than 30 times during wars and international crises that the U.S. has prepared and or threatened to initiate nuclear war. More, the first and maybe determinative attack on arms control order came when Bush and Cheney abandoned the anti-ballistic missile treaty. Along with the NPT, it was the cornerstone of the arms control architecture. And then came Donald Trump, who abrogated the INF treaty that had ended the Cold War. In the Track 2 sessions, there's a recognition that the initial failure of Russian conventional military forces to overwhelm Ukraine revealed Russian conventional vulnerability. Faced now with a strengthened and enlarged NATO, Russian military decline is leading it to place greater reliance on its nuclear arsenal. We see this in Medvedev's repeated nuclear saber rattling, and using the precedent of U.S. nuclear weapons in Western Europe, where they're based, Russians explain that the new deployment of nuclear weapons to Belarus is just equalizing the balance of forces. There are also increasing Russian concerns about defending Kaliningrad and assertions that NATO nuclear weapons, if they're deployed in Poland, would lead Moscow to respond by putting tactical nuclear weapons in Kaliningrad. We also need to consider that with global warming, the Arctic is becoming a zone of strategic competition. With the snowcap melting, there is the temptation to deploy nuclear weapons there. You'll remember that in June, Jake Sullivan, President Biden's national security advisor, gave a major speech. While highlighting U.S. modernization of all 3 legs of its nuclear triad, cost about, $2 trillion, he communicated a willingness to engage Russia and China in arms control diplomacy and pledged that more proposals for arms control would be forthcoming. Russians in the Track 2 process noted that the Kremlin did not trash Sullivan's speech and expressed interest in those proposals. But unfortunately, unless something is happening in a secret back channel. Those proposals have yet to be transmitted. There's also the dangerous absence of strategic stability, the absence of essential crisis and strategic planning communications, which is now compounded by a near total loss of mutual trust and transparency. And the icing on top of this dystopian nuclear cake is the rise of China, its expanding nuclear arsenal, its military, economic, and diplomatic competition with the US for regional hegemony, and its disinclination to engage in arms control negotiations until it has parity with the United States and Russia. Participants in the Track 2 process do not share our commitments to a nuclear weapons-free world, to common security diplomacy, or even to the UN Charter. Especially those from the US, Russia, and France, these people are deeply, if unconsciously, rooted in their own empire's ambitions. But within those limitations, they are united in pursuit of avoiding a nuclear catastrophe, and they share hopes to find ways to resume arms control and strategic stability diplomacy. Two processes that they've identified stand out. First, drawing from Cold War history, when the US and NATO on one side and Russia and the Warsaw Pact on the other had tensions near their height, and the US was fighting a genocidal war in Indochina, they note that there was compartmentalization. SALT arms treaties were negotiated even as the US was savaging Indochina. A hotline between Washington and Moscow was attached. There was significant transparency, including notifications of major troop movements in order not to generate miscalculations and over-responses. But at this stage, with the balance of power and shape of the emerging world disorder still at play, and with Russian-Ukraine war linkage, there are serious doubts about the possibility of compartmentalization. But if not now, maybe in the future. The second major point, and not particularly promising path that they've identified, and they've done so out of a sense of desperation, is negotiations within the P5 structure. The history of arms control progress in that venue is less than inspiring. But given the increasing complexity of great power nuclear planning, and preparations and diplomacy are becoming a three-way, not a bilateral game. And so the P5 is seen as one way to bring China into an arms control and a strategic stability diplomacy.
Joseph, just to say you've had 10 minutes.
Well, that's good. I've got one paragraph left to go.
Okay, cool.
So in the Track 2 process, like us, there is sober recognition of the truth that we are 90 seconds from midnight. In addition to our working to end the Ukraine war, we have the challenge to imagine the way to revive nuclear consciousness, which contributed so mightily to the end of the Cold War in the 1980s. Beyond consciousness, we must do all that we can to build a new movement to prevent nuclear war and to create a path to the nuclear weapons-free world that we need and deserve. Sorry, I've spoken a little bit too fast, but I got a last-minute request to do this, and as they say, writing short takes more time than writing long.
Thanks so much, Joseph. Okay, I'll hand over to Michelle.
Yeah, to give us the quick update, also we're going towards the end of our webinar, just to give us the quick update on what the peace movement will do from here. We'll call Rainer Brown. So Rainer, can you give us like a quick short update? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Sophie, for this excellent moderation. You know, in the beginning of the Peace Week, to say what should happen after the Peace Week is maybe not the totally right moment, but I will try to give some impressions what I think is absolutely needed now and also after the Peace Week. My first point is, and I'm very much connected to Joseph, is we have since Vienna, since the conference, another situation. The movements for ceasefire and negotiation worldwide, the support from government, parliamentarians, and peace movement is growing since June. And this is a good start point for more activities and actions. What I think is needed is, first of all, We need a stronger cooperation in the world between the different peace movements, above all with the peace movements of the Global South. I'm very happy that we have guests today from Latin America, but this is a key point to connect these international peace movements in the fight for ceasefire and negotiations. And these connections and these common activities should also include governments and parliamentarians in the Global South. We need a new worldwide coalition from peace movement, parliamentarians, civil society, and supporting governments for ceasefire and negotiations. That must create the atmosphere in the different society that the NATO countries cannot any longer avoid to discuss about ceasefire negotiation and cannot any longer avoid to come with own suggestions and not only sending weapons to Ukraine. Weapons will solve no problem. We need the alternative. We not need much more pressure. For the European perspective, I think we need a specific strategy in the preparation of the European Union elections. This means on one side, we need the contact with the European Union institutions. On the other side, we have to discuss how we can engage ourselves as peace movement in the European Union election campaigns, that the peace question is an important part of the European Union elections. Third, I think we need a Vienna too. I think we need in the next year and during the next year, maybe after the European Union election, a next meeting of the international peace movement, evaluate where we are with the different actions and activities for ceasefire negotiation and discuss further in common actions and activities. So my suggestion is that we take the idea of Vienna to have, again, such a meeting as an important point. Fourth point, and I again want to take up some points from Joseph. I think we have to enlarge our pressure for revitalization of the arms control negotiations. I think we cannot wait after the US elections. We now need to develop activity and actions that there will be again negotiations about nuclear disarmament, above all between the two big powers which have the huge majority of the nuclear weapons. The Treaty for Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons conference in New York in November is a good part of this campaign, but I think we need much more activities to revitalize these activities. Sixth point is, and Yuri was underlining it, our deep solidarity, our actions are for all the conscientious objectors and all the people which has to leave their countries. And we have to support above all Yuri and his colleagues in their fight for freedom. I think this is absolutely a challenge for the different peace movement. I'm happy that we have these international coalitions. I'm happy that we have these action days in December. But I think when we have the next court process in Ukraine, when we have the next court process in Russia, when we have the question of acceptance for asylum of the Russian deserters in the different countries, we need much more actions in this. I think this is an act of humanity the peace movement definitely have to do. My final point is we need the preparation of the elephant in the room, and this is NATO. And NATO has its 75th anniversary next year. And I think we should think about how we can develop and enlarge and coordinate our activities in the preparation and during the NATO summit. I have not to tell you about NATO. Tamara was doing this always in a very brilliant way, but I think we have to coordinate our activities. This is my suggestions, and the background of these suggestions is, and I will say it very friendly, that we have to deepen our solidarity in our common activities. We all know that we have different opinions. We all know that we have not the same background, how we see the Ukrainian situation in total. We have different opinions about Russia. But all this should be discussed and also exchanged, but it should not stop common activities and the climate of solidarity and trust between us. So my final words is, please let us continue working as peace movement in an atmosphere of solidarity and common understanding. I think this is the background of the success. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Rainer. Okay, we're just winding up now. So just over to Sean now for his final, very brief closing remarks from the IPB. Over to you, Sean.
Thanks, and excuse me, I'll keep it really short here because I know we are over time. Thank you to everyone for joining the meeting today. This is sort of the kickoff of now our week of action, and many activities we've heard about today are still to come. If they're happening in your surroundings, we encourage you to join them, to take part. And if there's nothing yet happening in your surroundings, it's not too late to organize something, even if it's small, symbolic as part of those actions. What we've seen today is that from the Vienna summit that we held at the beginning of June until now, a lot has changed, but the central principles in which we met and discussed in Vienna remain true and have served as a path towards how we move forward from here. I think our speakers have outlined really well everything, so I won't repeat it anymore, but I hope this has been an encouraging occasion for us to come together, learn from one another, discuss the peace movement's response moving forward, and I'm sure it will have ripple effects as we continue to do our work for peace in the coming months and years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you everyone for coming today. We really appreciate all the contributions and the participation. Thank you to our dear speakers, and thank you, Sophie, for co-facilitating us for today's session. And I guess this is it. I'd like to end the webinar for today, and thank you everyone for your contributions, and we hope all the best for your global actions for peace this week until October 8th. I know Tamara requested for those who want to stay in the call after we end this, then you can freely stay in this call and have this space for informal discussions. So for now, for those who have their other meetings and those stuff, happy Saturday, and hope you will enjoy your weekend, and thank you for joining us today, and see you again.